Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Consulting with Authority. This is Scott Cantrell, excited to be joined by another professional consultant and expert in their respective field. This is someone that I was introduced to a number of weeks ago. We've had a few conversations and really excited to bring him into the Consulting with Authority world and share him with everyone today. His name is Matthew Kroll. Matthew is a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, works with companies and executives to help them improve and maximize and optimize their processes and streamline their efficiencies. Matthew, so glad that you were able to join us. Thank you for carving out some time today.
Thanks for having me on, Scott.
Absolutely. So let's begin at the beginning. Matt, tell us a little about your background. How did you get to where you are? It's one of my favorite parts of these interviews because everybody's got a different story. And it seems like everybody who ends up in the consulting world, it's never a straight line from, leaving high school or finishing school and then becoming a consultant. It's hardly ever a straight line. So tell us about your zigzag of a path.
Sure. Maybe it's not a zigzag though.
Well, it may not be. That's fine.
Honestly, yeah. I've had a lifelong interest in engineering and how things are made, and that's
right in alignment.
Propelled me honestly throughout. I know exactly what you mean because when you talk to people and you hear they bounce back and forth between different things, but I've stayed fairly pegged around understanding operations, how things are built, how people work together to do it. I think it's endlessly fascinating. So I have a industrial engineering degree from Northern Illinois University, and industrial engineering, for anyone who doesn't know, it's very much about how we organize people and activity and machinery and technology and all that to produce all the goods and services that are around us. And so I learned about that discipline in college. I went to work for Motorola directly after college, and I learned how to apply that at probably one of the companies that was best, certainly at the time, in taking that kind of operational discipline and applying it everywhere throughout the company. And so I spent 11, 12 years roughly at Motorola. And, with a company like that, you got to there, I guess it was a bit of zigzagging. I spent some time in our services organization. I spent some time in manufacturing and distribution. I worked with field service teams, call centers. I worked with sales teams, product development teams, software engineering. I mean, you name it. And I got to kind of see everything. And I guess I should add to that. It was at Motorola where I was put into their Six Sigma program and earned my green belt, my black belt, and eventually my master black belt. And that addition to my industrial engineering discipline allowed me to go and work with all these different groups. I mean, we even went and worked with police departments and looked at the processes inside of a police department. Wow. And, how could Motorola help their customers, as that's a significant customer for Motorola, help their customers' operations run better. So it was a really interesting and important place, I would say, to go do process improvement. And so I really cut my teeth there and knew that I just wanted to continue on that path. I wasn't going to veer off, say, into a product role or some other role that I might have sales or something like that. And decided I wanted to try and build a program from scratch. And so I left Motorola in 2010, I think, and went to a technology company to really see how you could apply process thinking in the tech realm, right? It's different. There's a different kind of culture inside of those companies. But similar, that they need to organize and create an environment where they can deliver consistently to their customer, provide engagement and development to their employees. All those same things exist. So I went and worked for Here Technologies. It was called Navtech at the time, if anyone's heard of Navtech, and built a continuous improvement program from the ground up over the course of about 6 years.
Wow.
And really got to see the world because it was a company that did built navigation, so it built maps. So that was pretty cool.
That is a pretty cool thing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely opened your eyes to all the corners of the earth, and then also got to see how you kind of customize the approach of building continuous improvement for organizations that are, highly entrepreneurial, highly creative, a little bit different, the way they're organized inside, although at the end of the day, same thing. They have a customer, the customer wants value, and we have to figure out how we put together the pieces of the puzzle to deliver that value. And so after 6 years there, I said, this is just what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And it's time for me to go and build a business, found a business that could focus these kind of offerings on small and mid-sized businesses.
Okay. Yeah.
Businesses that, maybe, or I would say, I know for sure now, don't have access to the kind of skill or experience, that I gained, I guess, through my corporate experiences.
Right.
Or I should say, their access is limited, right? And so what they need is that expertise, but on a more fractional basis.
Understood.
So I founded my company with that intent, is to build an offer that could be portioned to companies so they can get the value, but they don't have to go and invest in, a group of black belts,
right,
or an individual black belt, that could be quite expensive over the course of the year. And so that's what I founded Chalmers St Consulting in 2016. I've built a book of business since then, and really applied what I learned through that Motorola and Here Technologies experience into that small middle market space.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So you focus on working with small to mid-sized companies. Maybe tell us a little bit more about that target market, if there's specific industries you focus on, and then give us an overview of how you engage with those companies. It sounds like you have a fractional COO type of offering that you provide to them, but maybe if you can sort of just share a little bit of that architecture behind that offering that you make to them.
And I guess, I'd say also recognizing your audience. I'd be real clear that it evolves.
Right.
I mean, I've worked in enough companies, product offerings evolve.
Sure.
That offer that I started with is different from the offer that I have now. And I only say that because probably whatever I say here, it'll continue to evolve.
Right. Yeah. We come back, we do another interview, and the business is transformed again. Right.
As I learn what that space needs. Yeah. So you had several questions in there. I mean, the first answer I'll give is, you could hear from the background, I've practiced continuous improvement in many different environments. So since leaving and founding my business, I've worked with a charter school. I've worked with a call center. I've worked with a chemical distribution company, a sales and distribution company. I've worked with some local municipalities in the Chicago area. I could go on. I won't. I work with traditional manufacturing. Yeah. My point in that is I don't have an industry. I have more of a profile, which can be a little bit harder to find. But, I like I didn't come up with this, but I like it. I'm looking for humble and hungry leaders that are open to finding new ways of working and see the value in developing their employees to execute on process improvement. That's ultimately any organization that fits that mold is going to be a good organization for me to work with and for my offerings. And the reason is that I don't typically have just a rote set of solutions, right?
Sure.
If it's a changeover on a piece of machinery, I have to learn a little bit about that piece of machinery before I
Mm-hmm.
can tell you what you might do to improve that change over time.
Yeah.
What's more is I'd prefer to actually involve your employees in fixing that problem, because for me to learn it and to fix it and walk away
Right.
is much lower value to you than for you to fix it yourself.
Yep.
And so owners and leaders that really appreciate that approach,
Mm-hmm.
that's they get it, and that's where I think I can do my best work and provide the highest value. Again, that's across industries,
Sure.
but it's sometimes hard to, you don't know, right? When you walk in the door and talk with somebody, you don't know. Usually over the phone, I can get a good idea. So from an industry perspective, it's pretty broad.
Yeah.
From a company perspective, the my first client, who is still a client, really brought me into, I wouldn't quite say a fractional COO, but to perform some of those roles.
Sure.
But that's not the way I position myself. Really, as a fractional master black belt, or a set of activities that will allow you to build continuous improvement into your organization.
Okay.
Those activities might be setting up small improvement teams to go fix certain problems. They might be a overarching evaluation of people, process, and technology to identify your gaps, identify those parts of the company that are underperforming. And it will always be development of the people inside the company, especially those high potential folks that can lead the charge on process improvement. And so that offer typically goes to smaller company owners. I would say we've worked with companies as small as $10 million. But then it also can go to director level, C-level operations folks. And so we've worked with companies as large as, actually, I don't even know, $50 billion.
Yeah.
And in there, we're inside of a specific department,
right?
Still delivering the same offer, though.
Yep. I think that's fantastic, and I'm fascinated by it makes sense to hear you talk about it, but I would have missed this question on a multiple choice test. That is about the heterogeneous nature of your target market. I would have expected there would be maybe one or two or three industries, and that's your point of focus. And hearing you talk about it, it makes perfect sense that your target market will be based on a profile like you described, and more based on business outcome as opposed to the nature of the industry. And again, I would not have thought that. I would have thought, oh, there's a process improvement, and there probably are, but I would have thought there's a process improvement guy or gal in this sector and this sector. But it almost makes more sense that someone like you, who has your high level of expertise, would work across industry. Maybe one thing that we'll touch on in a second is, when we get into diving deep into your expertise, is maybe how that cross section of industry is actually advantageous to someone like you, because you can pull ideas from different industries, which is something that I try to do in the business development category. So maybe we'll put a pin in that, but that would be a very interesting conversation.
Absolutely.
The other thing is, aside from target market, in terms of the nature you're offering, what I'm hearing you say, and I think this is a note it's a note for me, as I haven't really thought about my business through this filter. And so therefore I would encourage everyone who's watching or listening to take this note and figure out what is your adaptation of this. What I'm hearing you say is, it's one thing to sell yourself as a fractional whatever, or to sell your own expertise or services. What I'm hearing you say is that you go in and yes, you can perform those things, but your core focus, or a key part of your engagement every single time, is to educate and empower the team within the organization to be able to do the same things that you're doing, at least to be able to ask the right questions, right? They may never be a Lean Six Sigma black belt, but they can at least ask the right questions to get to the right answers. And I think that's a really interesting thing. I think so many consultants, guilty as charged on this end, will just go in and say, okay, this is the engagement. This is what I and my team is expected to fix or correct or achieve. And then we do the thing, and maybe we continue to work, maybe we don't, and that's it. I hadn't really thought about, I mean, I do some training and education, but I hadn't really thought about that being a core part of the work that I do from a business development standpoint. But it makes perfect sense that I would go in and make sure that when I leave or get the company up to a point that they can self-sustain, at least to a point related to, in my case, business development, in your case, continuous improvement. Maybe speak a little bit more to that. What do those types of engagements look like? Because obviously you're not imparting Lean Six Sigma black belt expertise to every individual,
No,
in the company.
absolutely true.
Yeah.
So I might have to think about that one a little bit just to organize my thoughts. So the first way I'll take that is maybe just for anyone listening to be aware, people come to me or anyone in process improvement for, I think one of two things. Either they just want the problem to go away.
Right.
They're looking for, give me kind of that answer. And I think we're wired as consultants, just want to do that.
Right.
Or they're looking for, help my organization get better at making problems go away. And I've learned one is that I work better on that other side, because again, I'm a generalist. If you bring me into your warehouse, I'm going to do my process improvement approach, investigate, pull some people together, get some data, and then I'm going to give you a solution.
Yeah.
But I actually, for some clients, that are really just make the problem go away, I might be better off, or I know I'm better off, and I do this now, bringing in someone who looks at 10 warehouses a week, and that's all this person does, because they're not going to do any data collection, and that can be okay, right? Because they're just going to walk in and go, oh, I see this, and oh, you're packing this way, and do you ship to Amazon? Oh, wow, if you ship to Amazon, you should be doing this, this, and that.
Right. I hear you.
I'm not going to do that. Now, what I think I add in value, which that approach doesn't, is what you've been talking about here, which is, but when that expert leaves,
right,
they're gonna, guess what? That problem that's solved today morphs into a different problem 3-6 months from now.
Right.
And Lean Six Sigma, and the roots of all the quality improvement tools that have occurred over the last 100 years. Those roots are in people. It's in how do we create people as problem solvers, and all the techniques really have the intent of making people better problem solvers, better collaborators, and better disciplined in applying solutions. So I've learned, I knew this in my corporate career, but I've really learned it that much more in my consulting career, that's the highest value that I can bring, right? It's sort of the question I like people like people asking me is, what's your superpower? Like, I think that's a really good question. And that's kind of evolved and emerged. Sitting here talking to you now, though, it's definitely that people development side, and specifically around making good problem solvers and good collaborators. And that ability can is needed, frankly, no matter if you're running a charter school network, or you're running a call center, or you're running some type of field services operation. Yeah, it really doesn't matter. You need people to be able to do that. And so I've really focused my work on making sure that that's a component, looking at what a client wants on the front end. And if that's really not what they want at all, finding a good partner that can just go, oh, I saw 2 warehouses this week that had that same problem. Right. And also, when I'm solving problems, making sure that the individual's development inside that is part of the problem solving.
Yeah.
So I'll often be partnering. Typically, my projects are going to include multiple client representatives in the project team, and there's usually more of them than there are us, because that's our focus is giving them that ability to go solve problems on their own. So when we leave, they have those disciplines.
Yeah, that's tremendous. That's tremendous. And again, it's one of those things where hearing you describe it, hearing you talk about it, it seems like an obvious thing, but working with consultants in our world, B2B consultants day in and day out, too often, sometimes it is where, I mean, some of our consultant peers are totally focused on people anyway, right? I mean, that is their focus, but otherwise, people like me that are focused on business development or sales or even general management or whatever it might be, finance. It's often we do just think about the nature of the engagement and fixing the problem or taking advantage of an opportunity. And then, is there another problem we can fix? Is there another opportunity? Rather than saying, okay, here's the problem, we're going to help you fix it. And along the way, we're going to empower and educate you to be able to handle it the next time. Makes a lot of sense. And again, in terms of delivering value to an organization, what better value is there? I mean, to use the cliche, but it's true. What better value is there in teaching the man to fish?
And that's only becoming more critical as we see labor shortages.
Oh, 100% right. Yeah.
The ability for people to move around from different job to different job, giving folks, and that's what, Motorola was so great at. I mean, that's why Motorola created just a really loyal and capable employee base, because they founded Motorola University.
Right.
And large companies at that time, I think they followed that same practice. But I think it was really critical to giving us all a reason to spend a big chunk of our careers there, because we knew they were going to give us development experiences. They were going to give us business experiences that were really going to be things that we rely on as we move through our careers. So I think it's that much more important now to think about the people development. And we need to get, one person is going to need to be able to do multiple jobs these days, right?
Apparently so. Yes, exactly.
One person is going to have to be able to see the jobs they shouldn't be doing. And recognize that there are automation opportunities, process elimination opportunities, all these opportunities. If only I step back and put that big hat on and go, wait a second, why have we been always doing this way? Why can't we solve this myself? And, also I tell companies so that you don't have to bring in, PwC every time you want some part of a process re-engineered or redesigned.
Right.
Those should actually emerge over time through your employees constantly looking for opportunities to improve. And I think that's just a better way to go about it.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So just taking a step back, thinking about the other question I have related to the all the different types of clients that you serve is, how did those client engagements come to be? And so one of the questions that I ask on virtually every interview is, what's your business development strategy, or what has it been from a marketing standpoint, and then maybe from a prospect cultivation or prospect conversion standpoint to someone becoming a client? Just sort of give us a quick overview, if you would.
Yeah. So I remember I was less than a year in for sure. And I went to like a sales training kind of session. Yeah. And the instructor said, who's your profile client? They picked on me and said, hey, who's your profile client? And I said, anyone who has money and is willing to pay me it.
I'm sure that got a good chuckle.
It is. And it's the worst answer, really.
But it's an understandable answer for, I mean, we've got aspiring consultants who are watching this and listening to this, and those who just entered the world, even accomplished people who are just getting started in consulting. And that is, I've been there. That's how you feel.
I felt accomplished. I mean, I left a very well-paying job, right? And, blessed my wife for going, and my children for, being open to it. Sure. Go do this. And you're right. The first thing that I learned was that I'm now a salesperson and I've never sold anything in my life, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And so, and selling is simple in concept and hard in practice.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'm probably taking your question maybe off in a direction you didn't want to go, but I'm just thinking of all sides of it. And
sure.
One side of it was knowing what I sell and who I sell to. And so I have to be very careful when I give that answer of, I will go across any vertical, any industry. Yeah. It makes it hard for someone else to know what you're really doing, right?
Sure. It can. Yeah, that's right.
And I can't go into a list, from Cranes or some, publication and just find companies that are open to continuous improvement programs.
Like exactly. That's right. Yeah.
That's not going
to. There's not a list that I know of. There may be parallel lists that we could find, but there's not a list that I know of that know humble and hungry executives like you talked about. It's a great criteria, but difficult to get a cemented list. Yeah.
Maybe someone in your audience here can come up with an algorithm that can look at LinkedIn and find humble and hungry and sell that as a list of names. I would purchase that. But you do have to know what you're selling and who you're selling to first and foremost. And then it, for me personally, anyways, it was utilizing that referral network. Still today, I'm 5 years in, still today, 80+% come from referrals. And maybe the real answer actually is 100% come from some type of referral.
Right.
There's no 1-800 Chalmers Street. Right. There's no Chalmers Street billboard. People don't look at a broken process and go, I need to Chalmers Street that. Right. One day.
Right. That's right.
But for now, it's networking. And so if I'm going to ask a friend, a family member, someone I've worked with, an alumni, whatever, from a relationship perspective, if I'm going to ask them to recommend me to the COO that they know or the owner of a mid-sized business or small business that they know, I better be able to help them understand what the heck it is that I'm selling. Yep. And I struggled for 3 years, I would say, to do that. And even still now, I'm still honing it. But I would say, from a kind of a raw ability perspective, I know how to do it. And so understanding that profile company, so I'm always looking for companies that, have a large amount of operations that are doing some repetitive activity all day long, that have, 20 to 30 people who are having to interact to get that thing done. And a owner or leader who is frustrated because something isn't quite going right. Mm-hmm. So when a referral partner hears that, they can go, oh, I might have heard someone like that, or I understand, some versus, maybe just saying, hey, I do Lean Six Sigma, which is very generic and different, people put different meaning into that term. And I've never said that, right? I've really always said, I'm looking to help people improve their operations. And these are the kind of operations that value what I do. And then from there, really generating the habits. Like I said, sales is simple in concept and hard in practice. So a lot of what's hard is having the habits to reach out to people. Yeah. It's like a constant job search. It actually, at one time, I was looking to meet more CIOs because I was doing some work in the IT space, and I still do some work in the IT space. I just haven't put as much focus on it. Anyways, the point is, at one time, I was looking to build more of a network. And so I created a group where I pulled in IT leaders that are in transition. In transition, folks are easy to access.
Sure.
And they have a fairly simple need that a lot of us can help with. We can help them network.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing to do in addition to helping create, more relationships with people that you might not create otherwise.
Right.
And so
that's a very clever idea, actually.
Yeah, and it wasn't mine.
Yeah.
It was like,
well, the most clever ideas are never mine. It's
yeah, right. Right. Like I'm much better at finding them and applying them than coming up with them. But that's building kind of that network of people, or adding that network of people was a very deliberate activity. It took time. I did it for probably 2 years, maybe 3 years. And I learned while I was doing that what I was doing is very similar to what they were doing, right? And many of them weren't very comfortable doing it. They're like, "Matt, I don't want to bug my friends that I need a job." I'm like, "That's not what you're doing, actually. One, you're catching up with them, which any reason to catch up with friends is a good reason.
Yeah.
Two, you're definitely going to ask them who they know and who you should talk to because you're looking for a job. Obviously, you're going to talk to them about that, but that shouldn't be your sole purpose. Your sole purpose should be to learn about them, learn what they're doing, understand how you might be able to make helpful connections for them or provide previous experience that might be useful for them. And then you're going to ask them what they're looking for. You're not calling them and asking them, "I need a job." You're exchanging value.
Yes, exactly. And truly focusing on building the relationship. Everything else will naturally come secondary. I mean, it does need to be a structured part of your conversation. It's not like you ignore it or hide it or anything. It's a structured part of the conversation. But like you said, it's not the sole objective, right?
It shouldn't be. If you go into it with that mindset,
right,
you probably are going to irritate people. So
yes.
you should have the mindset of recognizing that we're exchanging value, recognizing that it is similar to a job search. I also recognize that it's a repetitive, disciplined activity, right?
Yeah.
I need to have and keep track of, how many outreaches did I do this week, right? Yeah. How many were just kind of cold discussions? How many were friends? How many were more around the lines of a specific offering? Yeah. And watch those trends and hold myself accountable to hitting certain targets. And so there's a lot to be said about building the habit and the discipline of outreach and exchanging value in order to build business. I would say that's been core to staying 5 years and growing every year in business.
Yeah, I think that's tremendous. And I call that the law of compound activity, right? We know compound interest, but your note, I think the key takeaway, one of the key takeaways, several in there, but one of the key takeaways is the word habit, right? Which implies that this is something that is done consistently and over time. It's not where, can you do surges of business development? Sure, you can, but you don't need to depend on that, right? It's the consistent daily activity, even a little bit. You can just be a little bit every single day. And that law of compound activity, it'll take some time, but soon enough, you will have critical mass, so to speak, and that network will start paying dividends. And so it's that little outreach every single day will mount up.
And you asked this before we were on air, I think. You said, how does my process improvement work dovetail with entrepreneurship?
Yes,
right?
Exactly where we're going next. So thank you. That's where we're headed.
And I'll maybe you have an add-on question here, but I'll just put it to you that what I teach companies is that continuous improvement doesn't have an external motivation. You have to create the motivation. There's not a customer. There's not, say, an owner. There's not somebody breathing down the employee's necks to go continuously improve. It's actually a habit that you have to create. And so when you look at what you do as an entrepreneur, you're building the processes and systems to sell your product in the same way that an established company is building the processes and systems to deliver their product, and improving those processes and systems there's not an external motivator for that. You either do it because you've created some habits around it,
right?
Daily waste walks, weekly team retrospectives, root cause analysis, or you don't do those things and you suffer the consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. That is fantastic. I again, this is why we're having this conversation. And I tell a lot of my guests, sometimes off the air, I get just as much, probably more than the listeners and viewers. I do these interviews somewhat selfishly, but this is the exact reason why, is because we get gold nuggets like this. Continuous improvement doesn't have an external motivator. I hadn't even ever considered that before, but it makes perfect sense. And it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to think of the application in my business, or someone who's watching or listening in their business. And I can see that directly, because so often a operation or process that I'm working on developing, I wrongfully thinking about, okay, what do I get for that? Right? What's the external motivator that's going to, cause me to want to improve that system? And oftentimes the answer is little to nothing initially, right? It's a short-term,
or I don't know, or I'm not sure, right?
Or I don't know, which is probably the most common answer. Yeah, I just don't know. And so I put it off and procrastinate, or it never gets done. And I suffer the consequence of opportunity cost.
I'll add, perfect. That was so well said. And what you just described, that's status quo, right?
Yes, exactly.
And status quo has inertia. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Continuous improvement, change affects inertia, right? I have to overcome inertia.
Yeah.
So it's even harder, right? Because I have to overcome inertia in order to do continuous improvement. Status quo has all the inertia in the world.
Yes, it does.
And I see this in practice, and it drives me nuts. And I'm getting better at calling it out. But even when there's problems, there are problems I'm used to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're problems, but it's like a warm blanket. I know they're expected problems. When you go and change, you create new unknown problems, and our brains don't like that. They have to. No,
I was comfortable with the problem set that I had.
Comfortable.
I was used to it. It was status quo. I was in that motion. I was in inertia. You give me new problems, and I don't know how I feel about new problems. Yeah.
Yes.
No, you're 100% right. So this is just a note. We'll keep it in the interview probably, but I have some content I want to share with you, as I'd love to get your feedback on it related to the status quo, because so much of what I teach in business development around marketing and sales is about getting the decision maker off the dime, so to speak, from realizing their status quo is unsustainable or undesirable or whatever it may be. And so anyway, conversation for later. We're coming up on time here.
Sure.
What you've given fantastic advice around how a business-to-business consultant like you or I should be thinking about continuous improvement. Maybe one or two other ideas around ops and identifying processes that don't work, or conceptualizing how to fix them. Maybe just a couple of thoughts. And I know, in 2 minutes, I'm kind of asking you to solve all the problems of the universe, but any insight or observation you have to help someone like me, a business consultant. I have some processes that I think are working well. Others don't exist at all. And I know it's costing me time and money, but I'm not sure where to begin. What encouragement or insight might you have for people like me, which are a lot of people?
Yeah, the two most simplistic pieces of advice that I can provide are: you have to have a standard of a comparison, and you have to have time to do the comparison, right? Mm. So you have to have a standard of comparison means I need to know what good is. If it's if it's just looking at the end of the month to see if you generate enough cash, that's not a good of standard of comparison. Like I said, I was showing you my little sheet here because this is just one of my standards. I know I should be doing, 5 referral type calls a week and 2 prospect calls a week. That's my standard of comparison. When I do better than that, good job. When I do worse than that, okay, what went wrong? What were some of the other things that I could have done? So I have to have that standard of comparison. And not just in my business, my internal business practices, but also from a client perspective, which, depending on the kind of consulting you do, might be a little bit harder. I mean, I certainly don't get feedback every week from my clients. That's going to be less. So there's other things that I have to go look at, completed activities, things that I need to go find to make that standard of comparison, like records I need to keep myself to gauge if we're making progress on behalf of the work that we're doing for the client.
Right.
And then I need time. I have to designate. I journal my weekly sales and project activity every week. Fridays, typically around 3:00. It takes me about an hour to an hour and a half. I've been doing that every week for 5 years.
That's great.
It's an important point of reflection for me to ask myself, both from a business and from a serving the client perspective, am I doing all the right things?
Yeah.
My standard comparison there might be looking at the last week or looking at 2 weeks ago, or the goals maybe that I set at the beginning of the quarter. But without that, setting aside that time and creating that habit, I don't improve. I'm again trapped in that inertia of the status quo. And so I would say those two things, there's a zillion different techniques and a zillion different advice that can go around how you do those two.
Right.
But a lot of continuous improvement does come down to having that thing, that feedback mechanism in a standard, and creating the time for thoughtful retrospection. And if I'm doing those two things, I certainly have a shot at changing and improving.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, but I love the practicality in terms of the action items that you talked about, right? Because I mean, I have certain standards and certain mechanisms through which I monitor and measure my activity, my pipeline, those kinds of things. I do take time on a weekly basis to look at my pipeline, but I don't think I'm not actively engaged in that in terms of asking myself the tough questions. Now, around marketing and sales, I often am because that's my world. But in terms of other aspects of my business, right, I'll sacrifice those wrongfully.
Priority, right? I mean, we all prioritize.
Correct.
The question is, that reflection is asking, am I prioritizing the right things? Right. Or am I prioritizing the things that I like to do the most?
Precisely. Yep. No, you hit the nail on the head. It's like you do this for a living.
Yeah, I talk about it a lot. Yeah.
This is fantastic. I know we've only got a couple of minutes left. So, question I ask each time, I got tons of notes already, so we could stop here and it'd be fantastic, but I'll ask the question anyway. Top lessons learned, either these can be personal, these can be professional, but bits of wisdom that you might share with our audience today.
I think I really hit on them. Understand what your personal value proposition, especially if you're a solopreneur. Mm-hmm. What's your personal value proposition? If you're inventing a product or a service, fine, then what's the value proposition of that? But really understand that first. Recognize the need of building your network. Like you are the brand nowadays. Yep. If Elon Musk left Tesla, you'd probably see a drop in the stock price, and whatever company he started from Tesla that value would transition with Elon Musk, because the brand is as much Elon Musk. And at our lowly levels of the world, it's equally important. It's the same thing. Yeah. That I would love for someone to Chalmers St consulting their process, but more than likely what they're really going to do is they're going to call Matt Kroll because they see the stuff I put in LinkedIn.
Exactly.
So building that network and that value behind your own name as a brand, I think is incredibly important. And then building those things come from the habits that you do. And I know I've talked quite a bit about that already. So those would be my 3 pieces of advice. Know your value, recognize the value in the network and your own brand, and then build the habits to achieve both.
That's fantastic. That's great. Matt, if someone wants to reach out to you, maybe they've got a client that they want to refer to you? Maybe they are interested in working with you in some way. If they want to connect with you, find out how to access you, what's the best way to do that?
So my email address, Matt Kroll, MattKroll at chalmersstreet.com. My LinkedIn profile, I would say, is the freshest place. So my website's good, but my LinkedIn profile is always fresh. I'm putting stuff up there every week, and that's the LinkedIn. And if you go Matthew R. Kroll, I can't remember the exact slashes and stuff that you put in there, but
sure.
If you look me up with that Matthew R. Kroll in LinkedIn, you're going to find my offerings. You're going to find how to contact me. You're going to find some vlogs and things like that I do to put information out there, keep myself relevant. Yeah,
that's fantastic. And obviously, everybody will put those links in the show notes as well, so you can get easy access to them from the episode. Matt, again, thank you so much for the time. It's fantastic to talk with you. A wonderful conversation, as I knew it would be. I know everybody got a lot of value out of it, just like I did. And I'll look forward to our next conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate the opportunity to do something like this. And it was a lot of fun for me too.
Good. Excellent. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for Consulting with Authority. This is Scott Cantrell, as always, wishing you the best of success. Thank you for listening. I hope you got a ton of value out of this episode. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor of our show, Smart Solutions Media. Smart Solutions Media empowers business owners, consultants, and other independent professionals to easily attract better prospects and transform them into long-term clients. If you're a B2B consultant or service professional and would like to start filling your pipeline with better quality prospects, visit us on the web at smartsolutionsmedia.com to learn more about what we can do to help you. Be sure to complete the short 2-minute accelerated growth scorecard you can find on the website, and you'll receive a complimentary strategy session where we'll give you specific insights and recommendations to help you attract high-value clients. Until next time, make sure you are consulting with authority.